He was just a passenger in a red cap, looking to get to his destination in peace. But a few flight attendants decided to turn his trip into a personal nightmare right in the air. Little did they know who they were messing with. What happened next left everyone speechless. Jack Wilson, a 56-year-old businessman with a knack for keeping things low-key, strolled onto the plane with the air of someone who'd seen it all. Dressed in casual jeans, a plain t-shirt, and his signature red "Make America Great Again" cap, he was every bit the picture of just another passenger. Except, of course, he wasn't. Jack had recently purchased Skyline Air, a struggling airline trying to claw its way out of mediocrity. But today, he was here to see how his company ran, without the suits and scripted smiles. The moment Jack stepped into the cabin, a ripple of reactions swept through the crew. Sarah, a 28-year-old flight attendant with a sharp tongue and an even sharper judgment radar, elbowed her colleague Jason. Jason, 34, was the senior attendant on this flight and known for his strong opinions, especially when it came to politics. One glance at Jack's cap, and their expressions went from professional to "you've got to be kidding me" in 2 seconds flat. "Seriously, Sarah," Jason muttered under his breath, but not quietly enough to avoid the ears of nearby passengers. "Who let that guy on board?" Sarah smirked, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Guess security's taking a vacation today." "A MAGA cap? On our flight? Looks like someone didn't get the memo about the 21st century." Jack, oblivious, or maybe just unbothered, found his seat in economy class and settled in. A couple of passengers side-eyed him, but Jack's calm demeanor didn't waver. That is, until Jason approached him with a smile so forced it could have cracked glass. "Excuse me, sir," Jason began, his tone sugary sweet but laced with condescension. "But I'm afraid your cap violates the airline's dress code. You'll need to remove it, or we'll have to ask you to deboard." Jack glanced up, his face a mask of polite confusion. "The dress code? For a hat? You've got to be kidding me." Jason's smile faltered. "No, sir. I'm completely serious. Your cap could be considered disruptive to other passengers." Sarah chimed in from across the aisle, raising her voice just enough for the nearby rows to hear. "Exactly. That red accessory is making people uncomfortable. Why not just take it off? Show some respect for democracy while you're at it." A few passengers exchanged glances, unsure whether to laugh or intervene. One man in a baseball cap leaned over to his seatmate and whispered, "This feels like a reality show. I mean, are they really kicking him off for a hat?" Jack remained seated, his voice steady but firm. "With all due respect, this hat doesn't violate anything. I have every right to wear it." Jason's expression hardened. "Sir, you're causing a scene. We're asking you to comply with our policy." Jack raised an eyebrow, his calm composure unwavering. "Let me get this straight. You're saying I'm causing a scene by sitting quietly in my seat? Interesting logic." Sarah rolled her eyes dramatically, drawing the attention of even more passengers. "Listen, it's not about you, okay? It's about the message. That cap is offensive. You're disturbing the peace." By now, phones were out, cameras recording every second. Whispers spread like wildfire through the cabin. Some passengers muttered in agreement with Jack, while others giggled at the absurdity of the situation. One woman in the row behind Jack leaned forward. "Excuse me, but this is getting ridiculous. He's literally just sitting there. Can we take off already?" Jason ignored her, doubling down on his position. "Sir, this is your last warning. Remove the hat, or you'll be escorted off the plane." Jack crossed his arms, his voice carrying an unmistakable edge. "Not happening. I paid for my seat, and I intend to stay right here." The tension in the cabin was thick enough to cut with a knife. Jason's frustration was palpable, while Sarah glanced nervously at the gathering crowd of spectators. This wasn't the clean, smooth operation they prided themselves on. This was a full-blown spectacle. As passengers murmured and cameras continued to roll, Jack leaned back in his seat, utterly unshaken. He wasn't just standing his ground, he was planting a flag. For better or worse, this flight was about to make headlines. The raised voices and rising tension finally caught the attention of the first officer, who stepped out of the cockpit, looking more than a little annoyed. He scanned the cabin, his expression a mix of confusion and authority. "What's going on here?" he asked, his tone sharp but controlled. "Why is this flight starting to sound like a reality TV audition?" Jason wasted no time. Straightening his uniform, he jumped in with a rehearsed-sounding explanation. "Sir, this passenger is refusing to comply with airline policy. He's causing a disturbance, and we're just doing our job to keep things in order." Jack, calm as ever, stood up from his seat. His voice was steady but firm, carrying just enough weight to make the surrounding passengers lean in. "Can someone show me this supposed policy? Because unless there's a new rule book I missed, wearing a cap isn't a crime. I'm just here for a flight, not a debate." The first officer glanced between Jason and Jack, his brow furrowing. Before he could respond, a passenger sitting 2 rows back shot his hand into the air like he was in a classroom. "Hey, maybe we can all chill out a bit. He's just sitting there minding his own business. You guys are making it a thing." Another passenger chimed in from across the aisle. "Yeah, seriously, this is getting ridiculous. Can we just take off already?" Jason's jaw tightened, but Sarah wasn't about to let it slide. She leaned in, her voice laced with disdain. Typical MAGA behavior, always preaching about free speech, but never respecting anyone else's. The comment drew a few gasps, and some awkward chuckles from the crowd. Phones were out in full force now, cameras capturing every second of the escalating drama. Jack caught sight of the lenses aimed his way, but didn't flinch. If anything, he seemed even more resolute. The first officer sighed, clearly realizing this was spiraling out of control. But before he could take action, the captain himself stepped into the cabin. His presence immediately shifted the energy in the room. The murmurs quieted, and all eyes turned to the man in charge. The captain's gaze landed on Jack. His face was neutral at first, but as recognition dawned, his expression shifted. It was subtle. A slight widening of the eyes, a barely there stiffening of his posture, but for anyone paying attention, the change was undeniable. He knew exactly who Jack was. Before the captain could say a word, Jason, oblivious to the revelation, pointed a finger toward Jack and declared, "Captain, this man is being deliberately disruptive. He's refusing to cooperate, and we cannot let this behavior slide." The captain raised a hand, cutting Jason off mid-rant. His voice was calm, but carried an authority that silenced the cabin. "I think we've heard enough for now, sir." He turned to Jack with a polite but firm tone. "If you wouldn't mind joining me for a brief conversation in the first-class cabin." The murmurs returned, now louder and more curious. Jason and Sarah exchanged panicked glances. "What's going on?" Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible but full of suspicion. "Why is he being moved to first class?" Jason shook his head, his confusion giving way to frustration. "This doesn't make any sense. What's the captain thinking?" Meanwhile, Jack followed the captain toward the front of the plane, his calm demeanor never wavering. As they passed through the curtain separating the cabins, Jack caught the eye of a passenger holding up their phone. He offered a small, knowing smile before disappearing into first class. Back in the economy cabin, the atmosphere was electric. The passengers were buzzing with theories and whispers, while Jason and Sarah stood frozen in place, their confidence visibly shaken. What if he's someone important? Sarah finally hissed, the realization dawning on her. Jason's face paled. No way, that can't be, right? But deep down, they both knew this flight had taken a turn they hadn't prepared for. As Jack settled into his plush first-class A8, the tension of the previous moments seemed to evaporate, at least for him. The captain stood by, a mix of respect and unease in his posture. "Mr. Wilson," the captain began, his voice low enough to avoid catching the attention of curious passengers. "Please accept my sincerest apologies for the behavior of my crew. This is not how we conduct ourselves at Skyline Air." Jack leaned back, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "No harm done, Captain. I believe in letting people show their true colors. Let's see how this plays out." The captain nodded, clearly relieved that Jack wasn't making a bigger scene. "If there's anything else you need, just let me know," he added before retreating to the cockpit. Back in the economy cabin, Sarah was pacing nervously in the galley, her polished confidence unraveling by the second. "Did you hear what he called him?" she whispered, her voice shaky. "He said Mr. Wilson. What if that's—" Jason, usually the picture of smug assurance, was pale and tight-lipped. No way. It can't be him. I mean, what are the odds? He's just some guy in a cap, right?" But even as the words left his mouth, doubt crept into his tone. Meanwhile, the passengers were buzzing with speculation. Clips of the confrontation had already started circulating online, complete with dramatic captions like "Airline staff harass passenger over hat" and "Freedom of choice. Not here." By the time the plane began its descent, hashtags were trending, and viewers were taking sides in the now viral debate. When the plane landed, Jack disembarked quietly, nodding politely to the captain and ignoring the shell-shocked stares from Sarah and Jason. Outside the terminal, reporters and curious onlookers had already begun to gather, though Jack slipped through unnoticed, maintaining his preferred low profile. But the story didn't end there. That evening, Skyline Air released an official statement addressing the incident. The tone was clear and direct. Skyline Air is committed to respecting all passengers, regardless of their personal beliefs or attire. We are implementing immediate changes to ensure that our service reflects these values. The statement came with a surprise announcement. A new corporate policy spearheaded by Jack Wilson himself, aimed at fostering respect and inclusivity among both staff and passengers. As the internet continued dissecting the videos, two names stood out as the villains of the saga: Sarah and Jason. By morning, their faces were plastered across timelines and comment threads, with viewers calling their behavior everything from unprofessional to embarrassing. At headquarters, the decision was swift and absolute. Both Sarah and Jason were let go, their actions deemed a violation of the company's newly reinforced values. Their dismissals sent a clear message. Skyline Air was cleaning house, and no one was above accountability. For Jack, the incident marked a turning point, not just for the airline, but for the industry. Under his leadership, Skyline Air rolled out a series of reforms: improved training for staff, a revamped customer service charter, and an emphasis on treating every passenger with dignity. But Jack didn't stop there. He continued flying incognito, blending into flights across the country to personally monitor the changes. Word of his quiet involvement spread, earning him admiration and solidifying his reputation as a leader who walked the walk. The man in the red cap became a symbol, not just of fairness, but of standing up for what's right, no matter the odds. And while Sarah and Jason faded into obscurity, Skyline Air soared to new heights,